A scream tore through the crowded terminal. "All of you are suspended immediately." The entire space fell silent. Every head turned toward the black man standing in the center of the concourse. His shirt was wrinkled, his suitcase still dusted with travel grime, but his voice cut through the air sharp and unyielding like steel. His name was Andre Collins, and in just 10 seconds he froze dozens of airline employees, people who only moments ago had treated him like a troublemaker, in absolute horror. The phone in his hand lit up. On the screen was the certification of his 40% ownership of Aurora Pacific Airways, the very airline now under the world's scrutiny. No one knew that just 10 minutes earlier, they had loudly insulted him, taken his seat to give to a white passenger, and forced him to sit in the middle row at the back of the plane. Now every one of them understood they had just humiliated the man who owned them. Andre drew a deep breath, scanning the terminal as if to memorize every face. There was no rage left, only an icy calm. His voice dropped low, steady, each word deliberate. "I don't need an apology. I need justice, and justice begins right now. But to understand that moment, the moment one man could make an entire system bow its head, we have to go back many years to a black boy born in the South Bronx, the place people called the point of no return. When Andre was 10, the wail of sirens and the screech of tires were the soundtrack of every night. His mother, Clara Collins, a public school teacher, would sit by the window grading her students' papers under a dim yellow lamp. She often said, "You may not be born in the best place, but you can decide where you'll end up." Andre carried that sentence for life. As a teenager, while other kids played in the streets, he spent hours in front of an old community center computer. The monitor flickered, the keyboard was missing keys, but to him it was a window to the world. He wrote code by hand, learning from borrowed books and free videos. Some nights he fell asleep on the desk, his fingers stained with ink and coffee. An old security guard once asked, "What are you trying to do, kid?" Andre looked up and smiled. "I'm rewriting my future." At 17, he earned a full scholarship to MIT. The day he left the Bronx, his mother held him tight, tears streaming down her face. "Don't ever let the world tell you you don't belong there." And he didn't. At MIT, Andre didn't just study, he changed the game. His project, an artificial intelligence system that could predict aircraft malfunctions before they happened, stunned his professors. A major cargo company signed on to test it, followed by several airlines. Within 3 years, his software Synapse became an industry standard. By the age of 26, Andre was a millionaire, but he never forgot the Bronx. Through Synapse Dynamics, he expanded his investments. His strategy was different. He didn't just sell solutions, he bought problems to fix them himself. He invested in the companies that used his technology, gradually acquiring shares and reforming them from within. And on that list was Aurora Pacific Airways, a dying airline crippled by mismanagement and a rotten service culture. Through a series of anonymous investment rounds, Andre quietly acquired 40% of its stock, but he kept his identity secret. Because when you're a person of color, success isn't just a destination, it's armor. He knew that if he revealed who he was, people would act differently, and he'd never see the true face of the system he owned. A week before the explosion at the terminal, his loyal executive assistant, Lauren Price, warned him, "You should fly private. It's a major deal, don't take the risk." Andre simply smiled. "Lauren, if I can't understand my company from its worst side, I don't deserve to own it." He decided to fly commercial like any other passenger. No security, no privileges, no business cards. He booked a first-class ticket seat, 2A, under the name Andre Michael. That morning, Andre stood among the long lines at Newark Airport, watching passengers shuffle forward toward the check-in counters. A black t-shirt, jeans, and a simple blazer. Nothing about him hinted that he was a billionaire. But in his eyes was something no one else could see, an experiment in humanity. He watched as employees bowed and smiled warmly at the white man ahead of him, but when it was his turn, their voices dropped half a tone. Their eyes avoided his. He smiled quietly, saying nothing, only thinking, "If they treat a regular customer like this, I need to see how they act when they think someone is beneath them." At the security gate, an officer pulled him aside for a random inspection. The white couple ahead of him walked through without opening their bags. Andre stood still, hands raised, offering no resistance. He silently noted their names, their ID numbers, and the way they looked at him, as though he didn't belong in their world. Walking toward the departure gate, he glanced at the grey sky beyond the window. He thought of his mother, of that small room, where she once told him that patience isn't weakness. It's how the wise prepare for change. He didn't know that, in just a few hours, that very patience would bring an entire airline to its knees. His flight, Aurora Pacific Airways 476, was ready to board. First-class ticket-in-hand seat at the front position 2A. But just a few hours later, that seat would become the symbol of a battle between prejudice and justice. And Andre Collins, the boy from the Bronx, would use his humiliation to redefine power. Not the power to make people fear, but the power to make the world change. That morning, the sky over Newark was dull grey, with a light drizzle that felt like a warning. In the first-class check-in area, the yellow lights reflected off the polished marble floor. Andre Collins pulled his suitcase slowly, his expression calm, but every step carried careful observation, as if he were walking into a social experiment where he himself was the subject. The man ahead of him, white, wearing a grey suit and a gold watch, was greeted by the attendant with a warm smile. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. We're so glad to see you again." Moments later, when it was Andre's turn, that smile vanished. The attendant glanced briefly at his ID and asked flatly, "Collins correct. Does your luggage contain any liquids or electronic devices?" The question was standard, but her tone wasn't neutral. It carried something cold and cautious. Andre nodded, his voice even. "Nothing special, just a laptop and some work documents." She lowered her voice. "Window or aisle, seat 2. A already selected." "Oh." Her gaze paused just for a second, but enough for Andre to notice her surprise. Perhaps deep down she wasn't used to seeing a black man seated in first class, especially in the front row. He didn't react. He simply thanked her, smiled, and moved on. At the security checkpoint, the familiar pattern of coincidences continued. The two passengers before him, an elderly white couple, were waved through the fast lane. Andre, who had TSA pre-check, was instead selected for a random screening. He raised his hands, removed his watch, and stayed silent. The officer said in a flat tone, "Just a quick inspection, sir." But Andre knew to them he wasn't, sir. He was an exception that needed extra scrutiny, not because of regulations, but because of the color of his skin. When the boarding announcement called for first-class passengers, Andre stood up. The ticket in his hand glowed with the words, "First class, seat 2A." He approached the boarding gate. The male attendant name tag reading Darren looked up briefly and frowned. "Sorry, it's not your group yet." Andre raised an eyebrow and held out his ticket. "I'm in first class." Darren looked again, hesitating. "Oh, right." "Go ahead, sir." There was no apology, just a flicker of discomfort mixed with wariness, as if he had just discovered something unusual. Inside the first-class cabin, the lighting was warm, the leather seats, soft glasses of wine and juice already laid out. Andre took his place seat, 2A, the first window seat in the front row. A flight attendant approached Kelly Monroe. Blonde hair neatly tied back, her smile polite, but her eyes cold. Her voice was dry. "Water juice or wine?" Andre answered gently. "Sparkling water with a slice of lemon, please." Kelly nodded and walked away. 10 minutes passed. The white man in the seat beside him already had a glass of wine and a hot towel, while Andre's tray remained empty. He said nothing, only observed. Then a voice rose from the back of the cabin. "What's going on here? Where's my seat?" "I always sit in 2A. Andre looked up. A middle-aged man with grey, streaked hair and an expensive suit. It was Richard Halpin, the very same passenger the check-in staff had greeted so warmly. He pointed directly at Andre's seat. "I booked that seat." "That's mine." Kelly hurried over, her face flustered. "Mr. Halpin, I'm terribly sorry. There must be a system error. Let me check right away." She turned to Andre, her tone shifting completely. "Mr. Collins, could you please move to another seat? Mr. Halpin is one of our Diamond Elite members, and he usually sits here for medical reasons." Andre looked straight into her eyes. "I booked this seat 2 weeks ago, and I don't see any medical note on his ticket." The air grew heavy. Passengers began to take notice. Richard inhaled sharply and lowered his voice, but loud enough for Andre to hear. "Know your place." That sentence sliced through the air like a blade. A young black woman across the aisle lifted her head slightly, her eyes flickering between fear and sympathy. Kelly's tone hardened. "If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to call the captain." Andre nodded. "Go ahead." Moments later, Captain Stephen Walker emerged from the cockpit. He looked to be in his 50s, his posture firm, his voice carrying authority. "What seems to be the issue here?" Kelly spoke quickly. "This passenger refuses to change seats, Captain." "Mr. Halpin has special needs." The captain gave Andre a brief glance, one filled with the same judgment he had seen his entire life. "Mr. Collins," he said slowly, "for the comfort of all passengers, I'd ask that you move. We'll offer you a complimentary drink voucher." "I don't need a drink," Andre replied evenly, his voice calm but sharp. "I need respect." The atmosphere froze. Richard tilted his head, smirking. Sometimes people forget that money can't buy class. A few passengers chuckled quietly. Andre remained still. In his eyes the anger had faded, only sadness remained. The captain gave the order. 2 in-flight security officers approached, one large and clean-shaven, the other shorter Latino. "Sir, please come with us." Failure to comply with crew instructions could result in removal from the flight. Andre looked around. No one stood up. No one spoke. Only the young black woman shook her head slightly and whispered, "This isn't right." He rose, gathered his belongings, and looked at Kelly. "Where would you like me to go?" "Row 27, middle seat." The middle seat. At the very back, near the restroom. The entire first-class cabin was silent as Andre walked away quietly without a word. Behind him, Richard sat down in seat 2A and chuckled. "Thanks for understanding." As the plane took off, the roar of the engines blended with the steady beat of Andre's heart. He sat between 2 strangers, one grumpy one, avoiding his gaze. Each time a flight attendant passed, he heard the murmurs. "That's the guy who got moved from first class. He must have done something wrong." He didn't respond. He observed the glances, the gestures, the laughter that faded when he looked up. A soft voice came from across the aisle. "I'm Maya," said the black woman, leaning slightly toward him. "I used to work for Aurora. What they did to you? It's nothing new." Andre turned, his eyes softening. "You worked there. 5 years. I quit because I couldn't breathe. They talk about premium passengers, which means white, well-dressed. And people like us," she gave a bitter smile, "they call us the sensitive customers." Andre looked out the window, where sunlight broke through the clouds in thin silver streaks. He remembered his mother's words, "Don't get angry when they try to belittle you. Let them reveal who they are." In the very last row, Andre Collins, billionaire technologist and major shareholder of Aurora Pacific Airways, sat quietly in the cramped space of a middle seat between two strangers. No one knew that in that very moment he was memorizing every face, every action, every word, collecting evidence for a trial where the defendant would be an entire system. And as the plane's wheels touched down on the runway in Los Angeles, he already knew this journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. The announcement echoed through the cabin, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles." The plane rolled slowly along the runway, the golden afternoon light streaming through the small window, casting a soft glow across the calm face of Andre Collins. He was still there in row 27, in the middle seat, with no one greeting him, no one paying attention. As the other passengers stood up and reached for their bags, Kelly, the lead flight attendant, walked over. Her voice was cold and scripted. "Mr. Collins, please remain seated until all other passengers have left the aircraft." Andre looked up, his gaze still and tranquil like a flat lake. "Why standard security procedure, sir? After an incident, we need to make sure the passenger cooperates." The word incident slipped off her tongue lightly, but it carried the weight of blame. The people around him glanced his way, a few of them whispering. Andre simply smiled and gave a small nod. "I understand. You want me to stay seated? I will stay." She gave him a slight nod, then turned away. At the back of the cabin, 2 security officers stood with their arms folded, watching him as if he were a potential threat. When the cabin gradually emptied, and only the sound of bags knocking against armrests and wheels rolling on the floor remained, Andre picked up his leather briefcase, straightened his blazer, and walked out. Kelly was standing at the door, forcing a polite, superficial smile. "Have a nice day, sir. And next time, if you want a more comfortable experience, you might consider upgrading your ticket." The words stung like a needle. Not a trace of regret, not a single apology. Andre did not answer. He merely looked at her for a long moment, not with anger, but with a silence that was far more frightening. Then he stepped onto the jet bridge and merged into the flow of passengers leaving the plane. Outside, LAX was packed. Announcements, voices, blinking lights, everything blended into a chaotic symphony. But for Andre, the sound seemed to fade away. In his mind, only one sentence remained. "They think I will stay quiet." He stopped in the middle of the terminal, drew a deep breath, and took out his phone, which had just been returned to him after being held for the entire flight. Before he did anything, he needed to understand just how rotten this system truly was. The Aurora Pacific Airways customer service desk was tucked into the right corner of Terminal 5, the place where frustrated passengers usually came to complain. The line was long. Some people were arguing about delayed luggage, others about having their flights changed. Andre walked up calmly, like any ordinary passenger. Behind the counter was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, wearing a name badge that read, "Paul Simmons, Customer Service Manager." He was speaking in a bored tone to another customer. "We will get back to you by email in 6 to 8 weeks. Thank you for your patience." When it was Andre's turn, Paul did not bother to look up, his tired voice drifting across the counter. "What seems to be the issue? I need to file a complaint about discrimination by the cabin crew on Flight 476 from Newark." Paul frowned slightly, but his eyes stayed glued to the computer screen. "Fill out this form. We will review it and respond in a few weeks." Andre looked at the sheet that had been pushed toward him. At the top of the form, a line in italics read, "Customer Incident Minor Service Concern." He let out a small laugh and shook his head. "This is not a minor concern. This is organized racial discrimination." Paul looked up for the first time, his eyes carrying the familiar arrogance of someone who had held power for too long. "So everyone thinks they are a victim when they are not happy with the service. That does not make it discrimination." Andre stayed silent for a second. Then he spoke slowly, each word precise. "They called security to force me out of my first-class seat to give it to a white passenger. Then they confiscated my phone. Do you call that service?" The air grew heavy. Paul let out a small fake laugh. "Perhaps you misunderstood. The captain has the authority to adjust seating arrangements for safety reasons." He said clearly, "Because this Diamond Elite passenger always sits in 2A. Andre cut in. "That was not about safety. That was about privilege." Paul glanced around and lowered his voice. "I can offer you a voucher worth $50 as compensation." Andre looked at the slip of paper on the counter, his gaze sharp as a blade. "You think my humiliation is worth $50? Passengers nearby were beginning to pay attention. A few of them slowed down and started listening. Paul grew uneasy, his tone sharpening. "If you are not satisfied, I am going to have to ask you to leave the counter. I am the one in charge here." Andre gave a slight nod. "Then I want to speak to someone in charge above you." "There is no one above me available right now." "There is." "The terminal director." Paul laughed out loud. "Mr. Hart does not meet with customers. Who do you think you are to ask for that?" Andre met his eyes. "I am someone your company just humiliated. And if I have to, I will show the world how Aurora Pacific treats black passengers." The color drained from Paul's face. He glanced around nervously, then disappeared quickly into the back office. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. Then the door swung open. A woman in her 50s stepped out with short hair and a neatly pressed suit, Linda Hart, terminal director. She smiled the way corporate people do, polite but cold. "Good afternoon, Mr. Collins. I understand you have an issue with the crew. Not an issue, a violation. I was forced out of my first-class seat to make room for a white customer. They confiscated my phone. And now your manager tried to buy my silence with a cheap voucher." Linda smiled faintly. "So every situation on board is complex. Sometimes there are technical factors that passengers do not fully understand. What technical factor requires me to give up my seat to someone else because he is a diamond-level customer?" Linda's expression hardened. "I cannot comment until I have an official report." Andre folded his arms. "Then call them here. Captain Walker led Flight Attendant Kelly Monroe and everyone who was present. I will wait." Linda shook her head slightly. "They are preparing for their next flight." "I am afraid that I will wait." His voice was low but so firm that every other sound seemed to vanish. Some employees began to gather nearby, whispering. 15 minutes later, with Andre still standing there, back straight, and eyes cold as ice, the staff door opened again. Lauren Price appeared moving quickly through the small crowd, followed by 3 people in suits, the legal team from Synapse Dynamics. Linda turned, flustered. "Excuse me, and you are Lauren," held up her ID. "Legal representative for Mr. Andre Collins. And Mr. Collins is a major shareholder and a member of the board of directors of Aurora Pacific Airways." The words slammed into the terminal like a lightning strike. Paul's mouth fell open. Linda froze. The staff nearby began buzzing with whispers. Andre took out his phone and opened a document that clearly displayed the words, "Shareholder Certificate, 40% Aurora Pacific Airways." He looked at Linda, his voice low and measured. "I have experienced my own airline as an ordinary customer, and what I see is rot starting from the very culture you are running." Linda struggled to stay composed. I had no idea. That is exactly the problem. When a company only knows how to bow to those it thinks have power and despises those it assumes are beneath it, that company has already lost its soul. He turned to Lauren. "Call an immediate meeting with the entire flight crew, the regional management, and the airline's legal department. Right here." Lauren nodded. Linda could do nothing but watch trembling as Andre, the man they had just insulted, began rewriting the rules in the middle of one of the largest international terminals in America. Outside, the sunset light washed over the glowing sign that read, "Aurora Pacific Airways." Under that burning red sky, a storm was forming, not in the air, but in the heart of an empire. Just moments ago, the terminal had been noisy. Now it was suddenly silent. People had never seen a scene like this before. A black billionaire sitting in the middle of the customer service area, surrounded by dozens of airline employees, the same people who that very morning had believed they were just handling a difficult passenger. Now they knew that passenger was their boss. Andre Collins sat with his back straight, his black blazer perfectly smooth in front of him. Lauren's laptop was open. Beside him, 3 lawyers from Synapse Dynamics arranged files, the glow from the screen casting cold light over their stone-like faces. Linda Hart, the terminal director, tried to keep her voice steady, but her throat was dry. "Mr. Collins, perhaps we should discuss this in private. This matter." No, Andre cut in his voice low, but every word fell like a hammer. "I want everyone here. Anyone connected to Flight 476 should step forward." Linda swallowed and signaled to the staff. 10 minutes later, Captain Stephen Walker, Kelly Monroe, and flight attendants Brian Walsh and Hannah Ortiz appeared, their faces tense. In the back, Paul Simmons, the service manager who had just been exposed, stood half-hidden behind a column, his eyes darting nervously. A small crowd of passengers had begun to gather around the area, phones held up, whispering. The atmosphere felt like a public courtroom, and Andre was the judge. He began speaking in a calm voice. "We are going to talk briefly, clearly, and honestly. I want to know what makes a group of employees believe that forcing a customer out of a first-class seat to give it to someone else because of skin color and privilege is normal." No one answered. Only the distant sound of boarding calls echoed through the terminal like the heartbeat of tension. Captain Walker cleared his throat. "Sir, I was only following procedure. We have the authority to adjust seating for safety reasons and for the comfort of our premium passengers." "What safety reason required changing my seat, Captain Walker?" The captain stayed silent. Andre leaned forward slightly. His tone remained soft, but his eyes were sharp as a blade. "And when you say premium, what do you mean?" I was referring to our Diamond Elite members." "I see. You mean the white, grey-haired man in seat 2A, The air turned to ice. Lead flight attendant Kelly Monroe stepped in, her voice stumbling. "Mr. Halpern is a very loyal customer. We try to maintain that relationship by degrading someone else." Her mouth snapped shut, her face draining of color. Lauren, standing beside Andre, handed him a tablet. On the screen, videos passengers had already uploaded to social media played in sequence. The footage showed Andre being forced out of seat 2A, and Richard Halpern's voice rang out clearly. "Know your place." A wave of murmurs rippled outward. The employees nearby dropped their gaze, and Linda took a half step back. Andre did not move. "My place." I have heard that line my whole life. But today this company is going to redefine that phrase. He turned to Lauren. "Call the board of directors. We are meeting right now here." 15 minutes later, a large screen was placed on the desk. The faces of the board members appeared: Harold Bennett, Victoria Chambers, William Porter, all looking shaken as they learned the incident had already spread across the internet. The hashtag Aurora Discrimination had reached nearly 200,000 shares in just 1 hour. Andre Chairman Bennett began his voice tight. "This is serious." "But is it really necessary to make such a spectacle out of it?" "A spectacle," Andre repeated, raising an eyebrow. "This is not scandal. This is truth." He stood, and his voice carried clearly through the terminal speakers. These people believe they are simply protecting VIP clients. In reality, they are protecting prejudice, and prejudice is never policy. The crowd fell silent. Some curious passengers began to clap softly, as if witnessing justice being restored. Captain Walker tried to defend himself. "If I had known you were the owner of the airline, I would have Andre raised a hand to stop him." "Exactly. You only show respect once you know who I am. And that is exactly why we are here." He signaled to Lauren. She opened a report on the tablet that showed the complaint statistics from the past year 27 similar incidents, most involving passengers of color or with names of foreign origin. Every one of these was closed without investigation. "Why is that?" Miss Hart, Linda Hart, swallowed hard, her eyes shifting. "I was not directly informed. Perhaps the customer care team handled them." With $50 vouchers, Andre asked, his voice cold as steel. No one answered. From within the crowd, a woman's voice rang out. "I can confirm that." Everyone turned. Maya Lewis, the woman who had sat near Andre on the flight, stepped forward. She held up an old badge. "I used to be a customer service manager at Aurora. I wrote multiple reports about discrimination, and I was fired 2 weeks later." Linda turned pale. Andre gave a small nod. "Thank you, Maya. Now it is not just me speaking. It is an entire rotten system confessing on its own." He looked around, his gaze sweeping over every member of the team. "I used to think I came here just to check service quality. Today I understand I came to check this company's conscience." Emotion rose in his chest, but his voice remained steady. He delivered his final words to the entire board and staff. "From this moment, I am using my authority as a major shareholder and board member to suspend every individual connected to Flight 476. That includes Captain Stephen Walker, lead flight attendant Kelly Monroe, flight attendants Walsh and Ortiz, manager Paul Simmons, and terminal director Linda Hart, pending investigation." The buzz exploded like a wave. The captain turned ghostly pale. Kelly burst into tears. "Sir, I was only following orders. No one forced you to look down on another human being. That choice was yours." Lauren continued, reading out the decision clearly, effective immediately. Outside the counter, Dozens of passengers applauded. Some were live streaming and tagging the hashtag Justice for Flight 476. Andre was not looking for praise. He turned to a nearby security guard, his voice calm. "Please escort these people to a private room and help them pack their personal items. They still deserve to be treated with respect, the very thing they forgot to give others." Those words made several employees bow their heads. Kelly sniffled, but for the first time, she looked at Andre with different eyes, no longer filled with contempt, but with shame. Lauren glanced at her screen and saw the notification. The videos of the incident had spread across the internet views, surpassing 500,000 within 2 hours. Aurora Pacific's stock price had begun to plunge. Harold Bennett spoke again, his voice shaking. "Andre, what are you doing? You could destroy this company." Andre looked straight into the camera. "I am not destroying it. I am rebirthing it." In that moment, the entire terminal erupted in applause, not driven by anger, but by hope. A black man who had been humiliated now used that very humiliation to ignite a revolution in the airline industry. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Andre rose and looked out through the glass at the runway glowing under the setting sun. The last light of the day burned red and reflected across his face, where a faint smile appeared, a mix of exhaustion and resolve. Lauren stepped closer. "What are you planning to do now?" He answered, his voice soft but firm. "Start the investigation and rewrite every rule." Outside Terminal 5, the Los Angeles sky was growing dark. A storm was coming, not in the forecast, but in the corporate culture of an entire industry. And the person leading that storm was Andre Collins. 3 days after the confrontation at the terminal, Los Angeles still hadn't calmed down. The clips showing Andre Collins being forced out of his first-class seat and later firing the entire crew right there at the airport were everywhere across social media. The hashtag Aurora Discrimination had transformed into Aurora Reckoning, then Justice at 30,000 feet. Major news outlets covered it non-stop. CNN called it a cultural earthquake in the airline industry. The Wall Street Journal ran the headline, "Tech CEO Faces Discrimination Inside His Own Airline," while the public raged at Aurora Pacific Airways headquarters in Dallas, Texas. The company's leadership endured the longest days in its history. All eyes were on the large conference room on the 22nd floor, where Andre Collins, major shareholder and board member, had called the first emergency meeting since the scandal. The conference room gleamed with cold light glass walls reflecting the blazing midday sun. Dozens of executives sat upright, tense. At the head of the table, Andre appeared in a grey suit, his eyes sharp, his expression colder than ever. "Let's begin." His voice was low, steady, commanding. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Beside him stood Lauren Price, now acting as coordinator. On the large screen, Andre replayed the footage from LAX, the scene of Kelly Monroe's hesitation, Linda Hart's silence, Captain Walker bowing his head. The noise, the lights, and the discriminatory remarks echoed through the speakers. No one spoke. Some faces dropped, others flushed red. "This isn't just an incident," Andre said evenly. "This is the result of a system that has been broken for years, a system where premium service means white, powerful, and wealthy, and everything else is treated as an exception." William Porter, the company's chief financial officer, spoke slowly. "Andre, I understand you're angry, but what do you intend to do? We can't change the entire structure overnight." Andre turned to him, his gaze sharp as a blade. "No, but we can start today." He pressed a button, and the first slide appeared on the screen. Operation Reset Aurora Pacific's Cultural and Service Reform Plan. Lauren stood and spoke clearly. This initiative will have 4 phases: internal investigation, retraining, rehiring, and transparency. The room murmured. Andre raised his hand for silence. First, internal investigation. I've hired an independent civil rights law firm, Crawford & Myers, to audit all emails, procedures, and HR files from the past 5 years. Anyone found engaging in discriminatory behavior, giving biased directives, or intimidating whistleblowers will be immediately suspended. The HR director hesitated. But that will create fear throughout the entire system. Andre gave a cold smile. Fear of fairness. So we've lived with injustice for so long that justice itself makes us uncomfortable. No one replied. He continued. Second retraining. I don't want empty box checking diversity seminars. I want people to learn how to see each other as human beings, with value, not as data points in a CRM. And the person leading this program will be Maya Lewis. The room buzzed. Some exchanged surprised looks. Maya, the former employee who had been fired for reporting discrimination, was now returning as advisor for culture and internal equity. Andre looked around and went on. I want the same woman who was cast out for telling the truth to teach us how to change. If anyone has a problem with that, you can leave this room right now. No one moved. Third phase, rehiring. Every manager and frontline employee will be re-evaluated. Those who made mistakes but are willing to learn will get the chance to rebuild. Those who cling to prejudice will be dismissed. He paused briefly, then added, and the final phase, transparency. All complaint reports will be made public on a regular basis. No more hiding in drawers or changing case codes. This company will not fear the light. Andre's voice dropped more emotional now. I grew up in a neighborhood where people said fairness was just a word. I didn't build synapse dynamics to repeat that lie in the corporate world. If Aurora Pacific is part of my empire, it will be a place where everyone, no matter what seat they sit in, is treated like a human being. The room was silent. Only the faint tapping of a pen on the table could be heard. Lauren took over, switching to the next slide. Media and brand crisis. At the moment, Aurora's stock is down 12%. Investors are demanding answers. But the media is on our side. They see Andre not as a victim, but as a reformer. She displayed a New York Times headline on the screen, "When humiliation meets power, the man who turned racism into reform." Andre took a deep breath and nodded slightly. Good. I don't want pity. I want awareness. He walked toward the window, gazing down at the city of Dallas, stretching beneath the sunlight. We can't erase the past, but we can turn mistakes into public lessons. Starting today, Aurora Pacific will open its doors to oversight from the Department of Transportation and civil rights organizations. I have nothing to hide. A business director spoke anxiously. You're exposing yourself to public scrutiny. Exactly, Andre replied, turning back. Because only light makes darkness disappear. The meeting lasted nearly 4 hours. When it ended, everyone left in silence. Only Andre and Lauren remained. She looked at him and said softly, You know, in 10 years, working with you, I've never seen you this angry, but I've also never seen you this calm. Andre gave a faint smile. Because I've realized this is no longer just my story. It's a test for everyone who ever believed that justice could wait. Lauren rested her hand on the table, serious. Are you sure you can carry it? If I don't, who will? Andre answered. The late afternoon sun filtered through the glass, lighting his face, not with anger, but with quiet determination. That night on Aurora Pacific's Twitter page, a short announcement was posted. Aurora Pacific officially launches Operation Reset, a comprehensive reform program to rebuild a culture of respect and equality. Every mistake from the past will be faced with full transparency. Justice doesn't need apologies. It needs action. The post received over 1 million shares in 24 hours. Beneath it, thousands of comments read, "This is real leadership. He's not just fixing an airline. He's teaching the world how to apologize the right way, from the Bronx to the Dallas boardroom. This is the journey of justice." Back on the 22nd floor, Andre remained alone in his office. The Dallas skyline glowed beyond the glass, and Aurora Pacific planes blinked across the distant sky. In his hands, he held an old photo. Young Andre, sitting beside his mother in their Bronx apartment, an old battered computer on the table. He remembered her words. "If you ever get the chance to change something, don't be afraid. Fear only helps others keep their power." Andre smiled. Tomorrow, Operation Reset would officially begin not just within Aurora's system, but in the hearts of thousands who once believed that fairness was a luxury. And he knew the storm had arrived, but this time he was the one at the helm. 1 week after Operation Reset began, Aurora Pacific headquarters in Dallas had turned into a massive construction site of reform. Hallways that were once quiet now echoed with footsteps, and signs reading "Training in Progress" hung everywhere. The conference room on the 15th floor, once reserved only for senior management, was now open to all employees attending mandatory training sessions. Andre Collins walked down the corridor, holding a steaming cup of coffee. He wore a white shirt and a simple grey vest. He did not need bodyguards. He did not need a media entourage. It was just him and his complete focus. People looked at him with a mix of emotions: respect, caution, curiosity. Some called him the man who saved the company. Others whispered that he was a rebel in a suit. Andre heard it all, but did not react. He knew change does not begin with slogans, it begins with friction, and he was ready to take all of it. In the large conference room, nearly 200 frontline employees sat around the tables. On the center screen, a bold line of text was projected: "Equality is not a policy. It is a practice." In parentheses below it, the translation read, "Equality is not just a policy, it is an action." The trainer leading today's session was none other than Maya Lewis, the former employee, who had once been fired for daring to tell the truth. Now she was back as Director of Culture and Internal Equity. She stepped forward, her gaze steady. "Today I am not here to talk about theory. I am here to talk about people, because I used to be you." A few people looked down, embarrassed. Maya spoke about her years in the old Aurora, where she was praised for her productivity, but ignored whenever she mentioned opportunities for promotion. "No one ever told me directly that I was not qualified. They just said I didn't quite fit the brand image. You all know what that phrase really means." The room fell completely silent. Andre stood in the back, quietly watching. He noticed some faces dropping people who had once been Maya's colleagues. Some sighed. Some took off their glasses to hide the shame in their eyes. After the session, Andre called Maya over. "You did very well." "Not everyone is ready to listen," she replied softly. "They will listen once they see you are not just talking," he said. Andre nodded. He knew that no matter how powerful words were, they would be empty without action. That afternoon, Lauren Price walked into his office, carrying a stack of financial reports. "Good news first," she said, as she sat down opposite him. We have recovered about 8% of our stock value since you announced Operation Reset." "And the bad news?" Andre asked. "Several groups of former employees are filing lawsuits over being terminated. They claim they were only following procedure." Andre leaned back in his chair, his eyes drifting toward the distance. "Good. Let them speak. Once the truth is out in the open, we will not need to defend ourselves." "The press will swarm us," Lauren warned. "All the better," Andre replied. "We will show them how a company faces its mistakes without running away." At that moment, the screen in his office lit up. A video call from the United States Department of Transportation. Andre motioned for Lauren to answer. On the screen appeared the stern face of Deputy Secretary Angela Moore. "Mr. Collins, we have reviewed your invitation. The department is very impressed with how proactively you are cooperating. We will be sending a monitoring team to oversee Aurora's reform process for the next 60 days. Lauren flinched slightly. 60 days, that is sooner than we expected." Andre nodded. "Perfect. If we claim to be clean, let others prove it." 3 days later, the inspection team officially arrived. The press crowded the front gate cameras, shifting constantly. Andre personally led the team through every department: the recruitment office, the customer support center, the flight operations hub. In each place, he asked the same question. "If you meet a passenger who looks ordinary and dresses simply, would you serve them any differently than someone in a suit with an expensive watch?" No one dared answer right away. Andre smiled. "The correct answer is no difference at all. At the customer care center, once the blind spot of the system, Andre asked for a large screen to be turned on, displaying complaint data segmented by customer group. In the past, these reports were coded in complicated ways to hide disparities. Now everything was exposed. Over the past 5 years, customers with African or Latin surnames had their complaints rejected at a rate 3 times higher than other groups." A young employee lowered her head, her voice shaking. "I did not know the real numbers looked like that," Andre replied. "What is frightening is not the truth, it is when we grow used to living without needing to know the truth." His words made the entire room fall silent. That evening, when the inspection team left, Lauren stepped into his office again, her expression tense. "You know what is happening, right? Other airlines are holding emergency meetings. Some are worried the Aurora Reset movement will spread to them." Andre took a sip of coffee, his tone calm. "If they fear fairness, it means they know they are guilty." "And if they follow our lead?" she asked. "Then Aurora has done the right thing," he said simply. Lauren looked at him, her eyes a mix of admiration and concern. "You are changing an entire industry, Andre, but you are also walking straight into the storm." He smiled, his voice warm and low. "I was born in the storm. All I did was learn to steer it." The next morning, Andre arrived early. In the lobby of the ground floor, he saw a group of young employees putting up a new poster, "Aurora, where every seat matters." He stopped and looked at the slogan for a moment, then smiled. A voice called out behind him. "Mr. Collins." He turned. A young man with brown skin wearing a name badge that read, "Ethan Cruz, Flight Attendant Trainee," stood there awkwardly. "I just wanted to thank you," he said. "I was rejected 3 times by other airlines. They told me I did not fit their image. Aurora is the first place that looked at my skills instead of my face." Andre gently squeezed his shoulder and spoke quietly. "Thank you for believing in the opportunity. Remember, this fairness is not a privilege. It is a right we are born with." That afternoon, A preliminary report from the inspection team arrived. Aurora Pacific demonstrates an unusual level of cooperation and transparency. The internal environment is shifting in a positive direction. Lauren finished reading and looked at him. You have done what most people only dare to talk about. Andre looked out the window where Aurora planes, bearing the company logo, were rolling toward the runway preparing for takeoff. We have only just taken off, Lauren. The real storm is still ahead. That night when all the employees had gone home, Andre stayed behind. He stood alone in the dim office, staring at the giant map on the wall, every route, every international line that Aurora operated. Alone in the soft light, he spoke quietly to himself. Tomorrow I am getting on one of those flights. I want to see this new Aurora with my own eyes, not through a report. The city lights reflected in his eyes, part fire, part faith. Andre Collins knew one thing clearly: the fight against prejudice does not end with a speech. It is fought on every flight with every person who is treated according to their true worth. And tonight, under the Dallas sky, the owner of Aurora was not just leading a company, he was leading a new generation to believe that equality can take flight. That morning, Dallas was bathed in sunlight. Across the clear blue sky, a plane bearing the new logo of Aurora Pacific Airways emerged from its hangar, its silver-white body gleaming a blue stripe running along the fuselage like a ribbon. On its side, the new slogan stood out boldly, where every seat matters. Andre Collins stood by the window on the 22nd floor, gazing down at the runway. He smiled. 3 weeks ago, Aurora had been at the center of one of the biggest scandals in aviation history. Today, the company was being celebrated as a symbol of rebirth. But Andre knew well praise didn't mean completion. Real change had to be proven in the sky itself. You want to fly undercover again? Lauren asked as they sat in the operations room. No, Andre replied calmly. This time I'm flying openly. They need to know I'm there, but not to inspect, only to observe how they act when they're not afraid. Which route did you choose, Dallas to Los Angeles? The same route as that day. Lauren fell silent for a moment, then nodded. A full circle. At the airport, passengers began gathering around Gate 17. Aurora's new banners hung everywhere, showing employees of all backgrounds, white, black, Latin, Asian, all smiling together, under the slogan, "Diversity takes flight." Andre wore a dark suit without assistance or security. He wanted to feel the real atmosphere to see whether the new Aurora truly differed from the old one. When he reached the check-in counter, a young employee named Kesha Taylor, hired during the reform wave, recognized him immediately. But instead of nervousness or flattery, she simply smiled professionally. "Good morning, Mr. Collins. Your first class, ticket seat 2A as usual. We're honored to have you on board." Andre nodded and thanked her. No judgmental glance, no hesitation, only genuine respect. He passed through security. This time, no one stopped him. No one pulled him for a random check. No suspicious eyes followed him. Just another passenger. And to Andre, that alone was a quiet victory. On board, the atmosphere was warm and calm. The first-class cabin had been redesigned: soft tan leather seats, gentle golden lighting, smooth jazz music in the background. The lead flight attendant that day was Devon Harris, a young black man with a tall frame and a deep, warm voice. He bowed slightly to Andre. "Welcome back to Aurora, Mr. Collins. This might sound personal, but thank you. Without the reforms, I wouldn't be here today." Andre smiled. "How long have you been flying?" 6 years with another airline. "But I was never considered for international routes. Here at Aurora, they judge us by our skills, not our image." Then today, show everyone exactly what that means, Andre said. Devon nodded, his eyes bright with pride. He turned and checked the entire cabin, then spoke into the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Aurora Pacific Airways, where every journey begins with respect. His voice carried through the speakers, confident and warm. Several passengers smiled. Andre sat quietly, feeling a wave of emotion rise within him. As the plane lifted into the sky, the morning light poured through the windows. Andre opened his laptop to review the latest report. Customer satisfaction had risen 27% in just 2 weeks. Complaints involving discrimination had dropped 82%. 93% of employees now said they were proud to work at Aurora. A message popped up from Lauren. They're watching every move you make. The whole world wants to see how long Aurora can keep this up. Andre typed back briefly. We're not holding steady, we're moving forward. During beverage service, Devon moved through the cabin, greeting each passenger equally. His tone steady, his gestures professional, his eyes kind. When he reached Andre, he smiled. Sparkling water with lemon, right, sir? You remember, every passenger deserves to be remembered, even for the smallest detail. He served the drink on a silver tray with the morning newspaper. There was no rush, no pretense, only the quiet confidence of someone who understood the value of his work. A few minutes later, an older man in seat 1B, well-dressed with silver hair and a booming voice, waved his hand. Hey, I want to change seats. I'd like a window. I'm Diamond Elite. Devon kept his smile. Sir, all seats have been pre-assigned, but if any passenger volunteers to switch, I'll be glad to assist. I'm requesting that seat. The cabin fell slightly quiet. A flicker of déjà vu passed through the air, just like that fateful day in Newark. Some passengers exchanged glances. Andre watched closely, but didn't interfere. He wanted to see how Devon handled it. Devon bowed his head slightly. Sir, Aurora Pacific no longer prioritizes seating based on membership tiers. Every passenger has equal rights to their chosen seat. Do you know who I am? Yes, sir, but here, I know even better who you are. You are my passenger. And my duty is to ensure every passenger is treated fairly. For a second, silence filled the cabin. Then a wave of applause broke from the rows behind. A young passenger grinned. Well said, man. The older gentleman froze, then muttered quietly. All right, then. Devon turned, meeting Andre's gaze. They exchanged a brief nod. No words needed, but both understood the test had been passed. As the plane glided over the Rocky Mountains, sunlight spilled across Andre's face. He thought back to that moment 3 months ago, when he was forced out of this very seat. Now sitting again in seat 2A, his feelings were completely different. No anger remained, only calm pride. He opened his leather notebook and wrote a few lines. Justice doesn't come from rules. It comes from people who choose to see each other. Aurora didn't change out of fear of losing its reputation. Aurora changed because we saw the truth and we could no longer turn away. When the plane landed in Los Angeles, passengers stood and thanked the crew one by one. Devon and his team bowed respectfully, their smiles genuine. Andre was the last to leave the cabin. He looked around and saw satisfaction on the passengers' faces, the kind that no slogan could fake. As Devon escorted him out, he said softly, Mr. Collins, I just want you to know today, I wasn't just working for Aurora. I was working for the meaning of fairness. Andre placed a hand on his shoulder and replied quietly, Hold on to that. Because every time someone serves with heart, the whole sky changes. Outside, the Los Angeles sunlight was golden and bright. Andre wheeled his suitcase and merged into the crowd. Overhead, the terminal screen displayed the headline, "Aurora Pacific reaches record high in customer satisfaction only 3 months after scandal." Beneath it, a trending hashtag glowed, "Aurora Reset Success." Andre smiled softly, but instead of triumph, he felt a calm stillness, like seeing an old wound healed, leaving only a scar to remind you never to forget. He stepped into the taxi area. A breeze from the Pacific carried the scent of salt and the distant hum of airplane engines. He looked up, watching another Aurora plane ascend. Under the sunlight, the words, "Where every seat matters," shimmered like a promise. Andre whispered, "At last, justice knows how to fly." That afternoon, as Andre Collins was getting ready to leave Los Angeles International Airport, a small, trembling voice stopped him from behind. "Mr. Collins, please wait a moment." The voice was shaky, familiar. He turned around and froze. At a small coffee stand in the terminal, Kelly Monroe was standing behind the counter, wearing a brown barista uniform, her hair tied up her hands, trembling slightly as she held a cup. She had once been the lead flight attendant on the infamous flight. The one who had looked at him with cold eyes, the one who had said, "If you want a better experience, you should upgrade your ticket." Now, among the smell of coffee and the soft yellow light, Kelly looked completely different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a woman trying to find her balance in the ruins of her past. Andre walked over his voice, calm. "Hello, Kelly." She instinctively stepped back, half a pace, her eyes full of confusion. "I didn't think you would recognize me." "It is hard to forget," Andre replied with a faint smile. "Some people we remember because they are kind. Some because they force us to change." Kelly lowered her head, her breathing unsteady. "I lost everything after that day," she whispered. 20 years of work, retirement insurance, my reputation, all of it." Andre stayed silent. He knew her downfall was not caused by a single sentence, but by a chain of choices. Yet he also understood that sometimes, for a system to learn its lesson, someone has to pay the price. "Do you hate me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "No," Andre answered, his tone light as a breeze. "I only hate the way indifference gets called procedure. But you personally, I do not hate. I only regret something." Kelly lifted her head, eyes filled with tears. "Regret what I regret, that you once had the chance to do the right thing, and you passed it by." There was a long silence. The two of them stood in the noise of the terminal, yet it felt as if they could only hear their own hearts. After a few moments, Andre spoke again. "How long have you been working here?" 2 months. After I was fired, I lost everything. No airline would hire me. I applied to this place because they did not ask about my past." Andre nodded, his gaze softening. "Then maybe you are starting over. And I can help." Kelly stared at him in disbelief. "Help you want me to come back to Aurora?" "Aurora has a second chance program, a second chance initiative," Andre said. "Employees who are disciplined for discriminatory behavior, if they complete the culture program, and 6 months of practical retraining, can apply for reinstatement." "I think you should try." She was quiet for a long moment. "You would really give me that chance after everything I did?" Andre looked directly into her eyes, his gaze both firm and compassionate. "Justice is not revenge, Kelly. It is correction. And if I believe Aurora can change, I have to believe people can change, too." His voice dropped, carrying the weight of someone who had seen a lot. "The day you humiliated me, you did not just insult me. You insulted your own professional values. Now you have the choice to fix that." Kelly bit her lip. A tear fell, landing in the steaming cup of coffee in her hand. Andre sat down on a nearby stool, gesturing for her to keep working. He watched her make coffee, her movements still skilled, but tinged with uncertainty. A young customer walked up to order. Kelly smiled and asked gently, "Would you like a latte or a cappuccino?" The sharp tone was gone. There was no trace of the old coldness, no reluctant service, just a person learning how to be kind again. Andre smiled. Maybe real change truly begins when the person who was wrong is brave enough to face herself. As he stood to leave, Kelly called out, "Mr. Collins." "Yes, if I apply, will you be the one to interview me?" "No," he replied. "The ones who will interview you will be the passengers. They will be the ones to decide whether you have really changed." His answer made Kelly nod slowly. For the first time, there was a glimmer of light in her eyes, faint but real. Outside the terminal, Andre stepped into the flow of people. The evening breeze carried the sound of distant engines and the fading scent of coffee. He checked his phone. A message from Maya Lewis had just arrived. First quarterly report completed. 94% of complaints resolved within 48 hours. Satisfaction levels are now even across all customer groups. No racial discrepancy remains. He read it, then closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Part of him felt relieved 3 months of work had produced real results. But another part of him whispered, will this change truly last? That evening, Andre returned to Aurora's Los Angeles office. Lauren was waiting, laptop in hand. "Good news, Andre. The Department of Transportation has released a statement. Aurora has earned fair treatment certification. First time in United States aviation history." "Good," he nodded. And the not-so-good news, she hesitated. "Some former employees are giving interviews to tabloid outlets, saying your entire reform is just a public relations stunt to save the brand." Andre chuckled softly, without a hint of anger. "People only doubt when they are not used to seeing something good that is real. Let them talk. The more we are questioned, the more we must stay true." He walked over to the shelf and pointed at the model airplane with the Aurora logo. "Lauren, do you know why I didn't choose to change the logo or launch some dramatic new slogan? Because you want people to recognize that real change comes from behavior, not from signs on the wall." "Exactly," he smiled. "If we can change how we treat one person, just one, the world is already different." Before leaving the office, Andre received an internal email. The subject line read, "Subject Special Applicant Kelly Monroe." Attached was an application for the Second Chance program, with a short note, "I am not asking to be forgiven. I only want to prove that I can serve with heart, not with prejudice." Cam Andre read each word slowly. Then he nodded and replied to the HR team. "Approved. She will join the first class." The Los Angeles night was quiet. From his office window, Andre looked out over the glowing runway. Aurora Pacific planes lined up for departure, each one carrying its own story of passengers who trusted them, of employees who were learning again what fairness truly means. Lauren turned back and asked softly, "Do you really think Kelly deserves a second chance? All of us have made mistakes," Andre said quietly. "The difference is that some of us choose to correct them and some do not." He paused, his eyes lifting toward the sky, where the small points of light from departing planes slowly disappeared into the dark clouds. Justice is not only about judgment. It is also an invitation back for those who dare to step out of their own shadow. In the darkness, the lights around the Aurora Pacific logo glowed bright blue like a promise that fairness does not end with a firing. It begins with the chance to do better. Andre Collins smiled faintly, then whispered, perhaps to himself, perhaps to the world, "No one is born perfect, but everyone deserves the chance to learn how to be better." 3 months later, Aurora Pacific had become the symbol of an unprecedented rebirth. Across airports everywhere, planes painted in shimmering blue and silver rolled down the runways to the cheers of employees. People who had once been uncertain, now filled with renewed pride. Andre Collins appeared on the morning news, not as a tech billionaire, but as the man who sparked the movement for equality in aviation. When reporters asked what had driven him to do it all, Andre simply smiled and said, "Because I knew that if I stayed silent, millions of others would never have the chance to take off on their own wings." That evening he stood on the balcony of Aurora's Dallas headquarters, gazing at the starlit sky. Aurora planes ascended one after another into the night, each one a testament that justice can soar if someone is brave enough to lift it. Andre's voice blended with the wind as he spoke softly. From now on, Aurora will not only carry people across distances, it will carry hope even farther. 1 year after the incident, Aurora Pacific had not only recovered, but had become the most beloved airline in America. Billboards across airports carried the words, "Equality isn't an upgrade, it's our standard." During the anniversary ceremony of Operation Reset, Andre Collins walked onto the stage. Behind him stood hundreds of employees of every skin color, gender, and age. The lights reflected on their faces. People who had once been fearful now stood tall in pride. His voice was deep and warm as he spoke. "We cannot change the past, but we can rewrite how the future treats humanity." Aurora does not just fly across the sky, it flies in the hearts of those who believe in fairness. As the applause rose around him, Andre looked through the glass wall. Outside, an Aurora plane lifted into the evening air, leaving a glowing trail across the violet sky. He smiled softly and whispered, "Justice never lands." From the perspective of an expert in ethical leadership, the journey of Andre Collins is not just a story about power and justice. It is proof that a company's culture can be reborn when people have the courage to face their mistakes. Aurora has shown that true change does not begin with policy, but with bravery. If you believe that justice deserves to take flight, like and subscribe to help spread that message. And leave a comment below with a phrase that reflects your belief. Keep justice alive.